As you see, welcome to this session on writing project proposal for Marie Curie Individual Fellowship. We have two speakers here today. Our first speaker is Therese Lindahl. She's the national contact point for MSCA at Austria. She's also a lecturer of University of Vienna. She gives lectures at University of Vienna. Other than the fact that she's a wonderful person, just to let you know, she's also an honorary member who helped us a lot to organize this conference here. So thank you very much, Therese, and thank you very much for giving this presentation here today. Then we have our second speaker, Yuliya. She is actually a Marie Curie, or was a Marie Curie Individual Fellow, right now working at Leiden University. Before that, she was a research support officer at the Dublin City University in Ireland. So Yuliya has the expert, she was also an expert reviewer from European Commission, so she herself was a fellow and she was a reviewer, so she can give you also a perspective on from the both sides. And Therese, who actually for individual fellowship and other fellowships had a lot of experience to see people's proposal. It's part of the National Contact Point service, so they help check the proposals. So she can tell you about how to write a winning proposal. So the format would be, they would be giving two presentations and the questions answer session would be after that. So I hope you'd have a lot of questions and you will have a good proposal after these two talks. Thank you very much. Yes.
So hello, do you hear me now?
Yes, it is. This one maybe? Hello? Oops, but it was working.
If not, I will take this one.
Excuse me?
I can stop there. Yeah, yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, now it works. Hello. I'm really happy to see so many attendees here today. I was actually, when we were starting to talk about this proposal writing session, I was expecting to have around 40 people maybe, and I thought we can do some interactive elements and so on. But it will be a little bit different, but it's great to have so many people here. So I will start with a short introduction about the funding scheme, so about the Marie Skłodowska-Curie individual fellowships, and then some few words about how to start, so to say, the practice in setting up a proposal. And then I will end up with some tips and tricks for the proposal itself. Of course, we had to really squeeze a lot of information in a rather short time. When we have proposal training workshops at FFG, we spend 1.5 days with what I will try to inform you with in 1.5 hours together with Yuliya. So,
you can give it to her.
Beside me, also my colleague Reif is working at FFG with Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. She should have been here today, but unfortunately she could not come, so I will try to cover her part as well. Okay, I switched micro. And as you already heard, we have Yuliya with us, and we will do like a co-conference in this session. And as Mostafa already said, please save your answers for the end of the session. So, when you start to think about applying for a project within a funding scheme, it's important to know what is the aim of this funding scheme. What is the goal and the meaning of this program? And this is important to keep in mind when you write your proposal. And the Marie Skłodowska-Curie work program describes the aims of the MSCA as the goal of the individual fellowships is to enhance the creative and innovative potential of experienced researchers, wishing to diversify their individual competence in terms of skill acquisition through advanced training, international and intersectoral mobility. And I will come back to this word intersectoral because it's not always understood. But to start with, I will explain for whom the IF are, so who is eligible to apply. You need to be an experienced researcher, meaning that at the date of the deadline, you need to be in the position of having a doctoral degree or at least 4 years of full-time equivalent research experience. I'm glad that we have no age restrictions for the individual fellowships or anywhere else in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, and mostly the nationality does not matter, with a few exceptions that I will come back to a bit later. So, as you heard, either you will have to have a PhD already ready or 4 years full-time research experience. And the research experience is measured from the date when the researcher obtained the degree entitling him or her to embark on a doctorate, even if a doctorate was never started or envisaged. And I'm sure you know already that MSCA is a bottom-up program, so you can really choose your research topic yourself, which is very nice, of course. Nevertheless, when you submit the proposal, you have to decide for 1 out of 8 scientific panels. And this is to enable the Commission or the Research Executive Agency to then select the corresponding experts to evaluate the proposals. And the application itself, it's of course written mainly by the researcher, but always together with the future supervisor and the host organization. So you really need quite a lot of information from your future host and the supervisor to be able to write a competitive application. So be sure to get in contact with this person and this organization in due time. And the host institution is the beneficiary, so this the signing of the grant agreement with the European Commission is done by the beneficiary and the supervisor and not by the researcher, the fellow. The host institution can be, must be a legal entity, and it can be in the academic or the non-academic sector. So basically all types of host organizations are eligible to act as a host for IF. And they must be established in a European member state or an associated country. What you can also think a bit about when you plan your IF is this issue with the intersectoral mobility. One of the main aims of the MSCA in general is to strengthen the cooperation between the academic and non-academic sector in all schemes, also in the IF. So you could also have a company or a non-governmental organization or a museum, for example, as host organization. Or you can have an academic organization as host and then go for a few months to a non-academic organization. If, and this is important, if it fits to the project and or to your career plans. So you should not, just a second, you should not plan a secondment just for having it in there. It should make sense. So either maybe you need to carry out part of the projects there, or you can learn some new techniques, or you think that it's really important for you to spend some time in the non-academic sector because this could be a potential future career possibility for you. Okay, so you should think a little bit about this. I saw we had a question down there, but we will take all the questions at the end, please, just to be sure that we don't take too long altogether. So where can you go and for how long? Well, basically the very simple answer is you can go anywhere, and it will take between 1 and 3 years. Though this depends on the type of fellowship. We have 2 different, basically, and also based on the mobility rule related to the specific fellowship. And to understand the rules, you need to be a bit aware about the different country categories within MSCA and actually for whole Horizon 2020. So on one hand, you have Europe in a wider sense. So here you count all the European member states and also the associated countries. And you have the associated countries listed here. So just to mention a few, you have Iceland, Norway, Turkey, Tunisia, Armenia, and a lot of other countries. So all these countries, they have the same rights and obligations when participating as a host organization. So when I talk about Europe, it's all these countries. And all other countries not belonging to Europe, the member states, associated countries, they are the so-called third countries. And as I mentioned, we have 2 types of individual fellowships. Firstly, the European fellowships. And here you can apply for between 1 to 2 years, and mostly we see 2 years applications in Europe or associate country. And if it fits into your project concept, so to say, you can also include a period of secondment within these 1 to 2 years. And the secondment must be also within this wider Europe, so to say. And to make it a bit more complicated, within the IF, we have, or within the EF, the European fellowships, we have 4 different types or panels. The first and most common one are the standard European fellowships. And here we have a mobility rule that you have to stick to. So before you start writing and planning your application, be sure that you fulfill this mobility rule. And it says that you must not have been resided, working or studying in the country of the host organization for more than 12 months in the last 3 years before the deadline. So this is very important to check, because if you don't stick to this rule, you will not be eligible. Then we have 3 other panels with specific aims. We have the Reintegration Panel, which is for researchers that have been spending time in a third country and want to return to Europe. And here the nationality plays a role, so you will have to be a national of a member state or associate country, or be a so-called long-term resident of one of these countries, meaning that you must be living in one of these European countries for at least 5 years before applying. Then we have the Career Restart Panel for people that have spent some time outside research, maybe in the private sector, or maybe being on maternity leave or parental leave. They can apply for the Career Restart Panel. And finally, we have the Society and Enterprise Panel that you should apply for if your host organization is within the non-academic sector. And for these last 3 panels, there is a more relaxed or softened mobility rule, and it states that you must not have been in the country of your host organization for more than 3 years in the last 5 years before the deadline. Yes, and talking about deadlines, the 2 next and the 2 last IF calls within Horizon 2020 will be the 11th of September this year, and most probably then next year on the 9th of September. So that was the European fellowships, and I continue with the global fellowships. And here you can apply for altogether 2 to 3 years, and the global fellowships are split in 2 phases. So the first phase is in a third country, so outside Europe, in a third country for 1 to 2 years, and then as part of the project, 1 year back in Europe. And this is called the return phase. So as you can see for the global fellowships, actually you will need 2 host organizations, 2 supervisors, and so on. Also, for the global fellowships, you can plan secondments, and I should also add that the secondments are possible to any type of organization, so not only in the non-academic sector. So if you want to cooperate with another university, for example, that is not your main host, this is also possible. Maybe you have a very interdisciplinary project, and it may make sense that you spend some time at another organization, and this is also possible. And for the global fellowships, again, the nationality is relevant. So either you need to be a national from a member state or associated country, or you have to fulfill these requirements of a long-term resident in Europe. Also for the global fellowships, we have a mobility rule, and this is the standard rule, but it applies to the outgoing host in the third country. So when you go back to Europe again, you can go anywhere you want. Where you came from, where you have been previously, before the fellowship, or have never maybe been in this country in your whole life, doesn't matter. So the mobility rule applies for the outgoing host in the third country. And probably you are curious about the funding and the costs. And basically we have 2 categories. We have the researcher costs and the institutional costs. And all the amounts I will mention now are per month. So you will get a living allowance, your salary, and the basic amount here, and this is the gross salary. So unfortunately, at the end, this is not what you would get as payment, but this is the basic amount for calculating the fellowship, and for the living allowances, you have to use a so-called country correction coefficient, and I will come back to this. Then per month you will get a mobility allowance of 600 a month, and if you are eligible for it, also a family allowance 500 a month. And here the status at the deadline counts. So if you plan to marry or get children or something, and if you can calculate it, you can do it before the deadline, then you get a little bit more. And then the institutional costs, also per month. We have for the research, training and networking costs, 800 euros a month. And this money can be used very freely for the research itself, of course, but also for taking part in international conferences, in external training courses, and so on. So this is really for the use of the fellow, though managed by the host organization, of course. And then for the host organization itself, 650 euros a month for management and overhead costs. And just for you to get a feeling of the amount, so to say, as you could see, you calculate, the calculation is all based on fixed amounts, and our unit is 1 month. And then you need to apply, to multiply the figures I showed you by the number of fellowships. And the basic amount of 4,880 a month is applicable for Belgium as host country, counting as 100%. But then you need to check the country correction coefficient of the country where you are going. And some countries may be a bit higher than this 100%, and some others will be a bit lower. So this is to be taken into account, but only for the living allowance, for the salary. And the mobility and family allowance can be subject to taxation, and this always depends on the rules in the host organization, in the country of the host organization. So don't be surprised if you get different information about different countries. This is really depending on the country. And I would like to make some advertising for Austria, because in Austria the mobility allowance is free of tax. So welcome to Austria. And just to give you an impression, if you assume that Belgium would be your host country and you apply for an European fellowship for 24 months, you would get altogether around 180,000 euro. And for global fellowships, now I have to admit, my colleague did not tell me which kind of host, outgoing host she was calculating with when calculating the global fellowships, but around 270,000 euro. And a very new possibility within Marie Curie is the possibility for disabled researchers to apply for additional support of max 60,000 euro per project. And I'm sure you're also curious about the success rates. And in the first row here, you can see the success rates for the last 5 deadlines. And yeah, it's a little bit up and down, but around 15% success rate in average, I would say. And the number of submitted and evaluated proposals has been rising since the start, in fact, since the start of the last framework program, but it is continuing rising. And the last call we had last summer in 2018 with 9,676 eligible applications was actually the largest call ever in the framework program for research and innovation of the European Commission. So you can imagine the research executive agency who is in charge of implementing, they were struggling. So it's a high competition. And we had the lowest success rates in 2015 and 16, but this also correlates to the lower budget we had in that year, or in these 2 years. And as you can see for 2019 and 2020, the budget for this call is a bit higher. So these are the good news. And now I would just would like to say a few words about how to start, so to say, before I then give the word to Yuliya. And what you should think about at the beginning is to have the perfect match, so to say. So think about where you are standing as a researcher now, where you would like to be in 2, 3, 4 years, and what would be the next logical step to get there. And which host organization, which supervisor, which group would be the ideal one to bring you there and to teach you not only, and I will come back to this, but it's not only about carrying out research, it is also about learning transferable skills, but I will come back to this later on. So the main aim that you should always keep in mind when writing the proposal is that this project should contribute to your career development. So it's really an individual fellowship. Think about the word individual fellowship, and it's about your person, you are in the focus, and it should all fit together, and be sure to show this impact in the application. Yes, and of course, as I mentioned, you will need some information from the host organization, from the supervisor. So start, actually now is the right point in time to think about who could this person be and who could this host organization be, because now you should start to think about this and get in contact with them. Also check your eligibility, as I mentioned. I know there are many different rules, so if you are not sure if you are eligible or not, then contact your national contact point, and you will get the link at the end of the presentation, and ask them, and they will support you to check this. Then, of course, get in touch with your host organization, with the supervisor, to get their permission, their commitment to support you, and then just start and go for it. And to give you maybe some idea about the timeline, the call for this year will open on the 11th of April. So from this point, you will also have access to the application templates, etc., that you need. Then you can start to draft your application, and also check with the host organization where you plan to go, or with the NCPs, either in the country where you are, or maybe better, where you're planning to go, to check what kind of support they have. And as I mentioned, at the FFG, we have a proposal writing workshop 1.5 day on the 16th and 17th of May. So if you happen to be in Vienna, you are welcome to attend this workshop. Then you write your application and get some people to read it. So ask your friends, ask the host institution and or the national contact point, because many of them also offer proposal checks, mostly free of charge. So it pays out to ask them about this. And then on the 11th of September, we have the deadline. And this is at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and not a second later. And if you miss it, no one can help you, really no one. So don't wait until the last minute. We recommend to submit your proposal at least 1 week before the deadline, and then you can resubmit the newest version again and again and again. So don't wait until the last second, do it earlier. And then you have to be a bit patient, because the evaluation will take about 5 months. So normally you get the results in February, the year after. And just to show you the team at FFG, so it's me and my colleague Reif, who should have been here today, but she apologizes, and then also my colleague Jasmin Dolak-Struss, who is here and is acting as rapporteur for this session. So we are the Marie Curie team at FFG in Austria. So you're welcome to ask us for advice, and then in Austria you also have at all the universities, as everywhere in Europe, most universities have support, administrative support, and grant offices, which you can find on this link. And of course, you have similar networks and systems all over Europe, so you can find national contact points in all member states and associated countries, and also in some third countries. So you can check this link on the funding and tender portal to find the NCP who is in charge of your host country. There is also a project named Net for Mobility, where you can find some hosting offers, and you can also find a handbook for IF proposal writing. There is a guide for applicants from the Commission that I will explain to you later, but you also have this IF proposal handbook on the Net for Mobility website. And I'm sure you have heard about the Euraccess network, and in the last years we have seen more and more hosting or potential host organizations that offer, or they publish their expression of interest to host an IF. So it can really pay out to take a look on this website to check what kind of, or if there are any research organizations in your field that are really interested in acting as an IF host. And I will come back a little bit later about more specific instructions about the proposal itself. But at first I will pass the word to Yuliya, who has a lot of experience about writing herself.
Thank you very much. So now you heard how it should be done. From me, you're going to hear the reality. Submitting 1 week before the deadline is a dream, and I wish people would do it more often. So I applied in 2015. Actually, I'm glad to see this was the highest competition, the year of highest competition, and I was one of them. But to say the truth, before I applied, I had a lot of experience with Marie Curie individual fellowships, because I left academia, and for 6 years I was a research officer at an institution in Dublin who was helping people to apply for this grant. So I thought, look, I know so much, and then I was missing research, so I want to go back. And I applied in the Career Restart Fellowship. So your application starts with looking for your host. For me, it was the consideration you should take into account. I mean, apart from scientific ones, you know, which country do you want to go? Do you want to learn a new language, or do you want to go to an English-speaking country? From Dublin, I chose the Netherlands. It's very close. They speak English a lot, and it's a very family-friendly country. That's what I heard, and it was attractive to me because I already had a family at this stage. Then, knowing how the application runs, I was trying to choose a host that obviously was in my area, that was the best, from whom I can learn really a lot, because all those things you need to put in the application later on. And you know what? It doesn't hurt actually to contact a few potential hosts, and then, well, maybe someone is not going to be interested, or later on you can decide. And now is the good time to contact them, and I also knew that, but I've contacted mine 2 months before the deadline. And it just happened that my boss, in the same line of doing things, well, he's a very last-minute person, as I found out. The fact that he replied to my email of expression of interest at midnight and mentioned he was on holidays should have given me the first warning sign. But he's an amazing and aspiring scientist, and I absolutely am delighted and confident in my choice. So your host would want to talk to, somehow to meet you, probably, if there is an opportunity to meet. We talked on Skype, and I found that, so my supervisor wanted actually in the first meeting to get to know me as a person a little bit, my motivation behind why would you leave your country and take off with the whole family. So be prepared maybe for this kind of questions as well. And then, of course, we need to discuss the scientific idea. And I've been out of research for 6 years. So, to be honest, I wasn't much clued in. I tried to cope with what's going on in my field, and I'm in the area of analytical chemistry, separation science, microfluidics, diagnostics. But I told my boss, this is the set of skills I have from when I was doing my PhD and my earlier postdocs. And I know you're doing amazing research. I'm interested in this area and in this, but look, let's combine these skills and do something. I want to be useful in your group. And I have to say the project we came up with was really good as utilizing the background of my skills. That's what you should have for your ideal project for Marie Curie proposal. You should be able to perform it, but you have to learn a lot as well. So there were new areas, new techniques that I would have learned on top of the skills I had. A new area, I actually entered a totally new area of research of extracellular vesicles that didn't exist 10 years ago when I was still in research. So it was a really good time. So a lot of applications have secondments, and I also knew that, and I knew good to have, and I said this to my supervisor. But as the project progressed, we realized it's just not going to work. You know, you cannot tag on something that it's not really meaningful. We had a company that was in collaboration with this project, but you know, there was no point for me to go and do it there. So this has to be meaningful. The most time I spent was developing the idea. You shouldn't underestimate just talking, just thinking. Once you have this idea worked out to the very little details, that's already easy. And the writing itself, for me, took 3 weeks, full on 3 weeks. I didn't have a job, but I was on maternity leave and I had a 2-month-old baby. I was typing with one hand and baby on the other hand at night. So I think whatever you do might not be as difficult. Thank you. But it tells you also it is possible. I did write it absolutely on my own. I mean, yeah, my boss. And also this is a test for your boss as well. They might not want to help you to write as like your actual writing. Intellectual input, of course. And you have to have that intellectual input. You can see it in the application, but you should count on yourself on writing. I submitted it all by myself 2 hours before the deadline, and not by my fault. I wish it was earlier, but yeah, it happens. And I guess things that I would have done different now, I would have loved to have that secondment to industry. Maybe I should have, insisted on choosing projects slightly different, because I still don't know if I'm going to stay in academia. I came back to academia, but I don't know. And I would have loved to have this hands-on experience in industry. And also that would have given me a bigger network if I went to another place. Like, I'm not afraid of moving places. And I really think this is an amazing part of Marie Curie schemes, this intersectoral experience. So communication with your supervisor is important. It will be obvious in your proposal whether he was involved, he, she, or not. Be unique, I guess. Just write about yourself, don't try to copy someone else. First, with this proposal, try to reach what you want to say, which you want to do. And yes, asking someone else to read, just do it, just do it. I didn't have that opportunity with the 2 hours before the deadline, but you have to do it. So this is my part for this, and we can continue with further information.
So, she will come back. Thank you very much. And I would like to add that the timeline I showed, I don't know if you noticed the heading. I think it was like the optimal timeline from the NCP's point of view. So I know in real it may work different, okay? So I will give a few tips and tricks for the proposal text itself. Of course, in this context here, we cannot go that much into detail, but I will give you a quick overview and also point out some specific issues where we have noticed maybe the biggest difficulties for the applicants. So, some challenges. As I said already, it's not only about to describe a research project, but also yourself and your career ambitions, and also to put a related training plan in this proposal, and to connect this training plan to the expertise and the possibilities you have at the host organization. And then, of course, to fit all this information into 10 pages for the 3 main sections. And this is actually the next slide showing the 3 main sections: excellence, impact, and implementation. And this part must not be more than 10 pages. And they are very strict on this, so they will cut your proposal after 10 pages. So you must stick to it, actually. These 3 criteria are also at the same time the main evaluation criteria, and we will get back to this too. In addition to the 10 pages, you have your CV, and this may be up to 5 pages. Then the description of the participating organization or organizations, if it's a global fellowship or if you have a secondment. Then a section about ethical aspects in the project, and if you apply for a global fellowship, you will also need a letter of commitment from the outgoing host, so the host in the 3rd country. This is very important to be aware of. You really need this letter of commitment. If without, you have no chance at all. And maybe just a small tip, of course, you can start with every section you want, but it could be useful to start with a CV, to bring this in form, adapted to an IF, and also the description of the host organization. And as we said, you also need input here from the host. And this is basically the ground for writing then section 1 to 3, because it should all be interlinked, of course, and reflecting each other. What quite common mistake that we see in many applications is that the information you get from the host organization is a very generic or a very standard one that they are using for a lot of applications. And this is very obvious to evaluators, and they don't like it at all, and neither do I. So really try to have also the tables in part 5, in section 5, describing the host organization, adapted to your specific needs for this project. So don't put, for example, earlier projects or publications of the supervisor that are not relevant to your application. Yes, and as we said, it's not only about research. So what kind of training activities can you include in this proposal? Well, training through research, of course, it is the core part of it. So you should describe your research project. Then also describe hands-on training that you will get within the project. In scientific skills, maybe new techniques, instruments, and so on. But then also training in transferable skills. So just to mention a few, it could be proposal preparation or project management, ethical issues maybe, exploitation of the research results, and so on. We already mentioned the interdisciplinary transfer of knowledge. So if you have an interdisciplinary project, then also highlight this in the application. And if it makes sense, maybe cooperate also with other host organizations. And it must not necessarily be a secondment for a long duration. You can cooperate with other organizations, maybe going just for short visits. This is also possible. Yes, you can also, of course, participate in the research and financial management of the project as to learn also this part, and organization of the scientific training and dissemination events and so on. Now, extremely important, follow the template. As soon as the call opens, you will have access on the funders and tender and funders portal. This is new. It was a participant portal. They have a new name for it now. There you will find the guide for applicants describing exactly what you should put in the application. So read the guide for applicants from the start till the end. And you will also have a template for drafting the proposal, which you can download after registering for the call. So there you have already the right layout, the right size, and so on. So this is just the easy way to go, to download the template and to follow the headings in there. Because this is so important, because the structure of the proposal is at the same time the structure of the evaluation criteria. So we have excellence, impact, implementation, and they are then divided also in sub-evaluation criteria, all reflected in the structure and the headings in the guide for applicants and in the template. So stick to this. And in this marked line, you can see we have a weighting. You can, for each main evaluation criteria, you can get maximum 5 scores. And when counting the final result, Section 1, Excellence, will have a weighting of 50%, Section 2, 30%, and Section 3, 20%. Dissemination and communication is something that became more and more important in proposal, in writing the proposal, but of course then during the project itself. And dissemination is not the same as communication. And here we can see that some applicants have difficulties, and this is why I'm pointing this out. So the dissemination is targeting as peers, like other researchers in the wider research and innovation community, maybe the industry, maybe policymakers. So think about who is the person or the group of persons who can use my project results, and they should be informed about the outcome. And this is to be described in Section 2.2. And then the communication is targeted at the general public to create awareness among the general public about the project and its results, and show the implications for citizens and society. And of course, this must be done, or should be done, in a way that can be understood also by non-specialists. And it's also important for the researchers themselves to understand that and to know how to communicate results to the general public. And here you can possibly get some support by your host organizations. Many universities and other research organizations already have their tools, their strategies for communication and dissemination, and you don't have always to start from scratch. Maybe you can join activities, get support from some publication officers and so on. So ask your host organization if they can deliver some information for you to write the proposal. And it's also important to be as specific as possible when doing this. This is true for the whole proposal, but especially in this section, in the impact section where you have these subsections, people tend to be quite general in the description. And when if you write in a too generic way, you will not convince the evaluators. So try to be very specific, explain for whom you are doing what, how often you plan to do it, and so on. And the 10 pages I mentioned, you can decide yourself how much or how many of these pages to use on the 3 sections. But just to give you an example of the experience we have seen so far in most applications, most applicants spend like 5 to 6 pages on the excellent part, then around 2 for the impact part, and 2 to 3 pages for the implementation part. And this also a little bit reflects these weighting scores I was showing in the previous slides. So when you start to draft your proposal, try to think about it a little bit like a story. So show also what you have written in your CV should be reflected in section 1 especially, and don't come up with totally different informations in different parts. And just to get a short impression about the subsections and sub-evaluation criteria, in section 1 you should describe the research project as such, then the training activities, the training program, also the qualification of the supervisor and the group, the host organization, and of course yourself, your experience. In section 2, the impact part, then, as I said, no, I did not say that. Yeah, I said it at the very beginning. One of the most important things when writing it, show the impact on your career development. Then dissemination, communication or outreach, and in the impact, the implementation part, the work plan, the project management and risk management, and the institutional commitment or institutional environment. So this is basically what you have to describe in the proposal. I think it's also very nice if you can find a catchy acronym for the project. It helps evaluators not giving you a better score, but to remember your proposal, because they are reading a lot of applications. And if you see an acronym and you can connect it with the content, then it's also easier to, to remember it and connect to it again. And in the guide for applicants, you have instructions on the layout, so the font size, the margins, and these things. So all this information is in the guide for applicants. I will not bring it here. Then try to keep the visual impression simple and calm, so not mixing too many font styles or highlighting too much. And it's also important to be consistent in the whole proposal. So if you have a work packages described in section 1 or tasks described, deliverables and so on, then be sure to have the same wording and naming also in the rest of the proposals. If it makes sense, we often suggest then that when you start writing and describing the research project as such, then already here in section 1.1, you can divide the planned work in work packages. And then in the implementation part, where you have the work plan, you can save some space in. If you have already described a lot of it in 1.1, then you can have shorter descriptions in the implementation part. And it's also easier for the evaluators to get a good understanding and a good overview of the planned work if you divide the work already from the beginning in work packages. It does not always make sense, but you should think about it. And just very practical tip to save a little bit of space, because this is always difficult to stick to the 10 pages. Avoid to have too many subchapters, because then you often lose some space and you can just highlight new parts of the proposal with font size, for example. And as I said, keep the description consistent and clear. So make sure that tables of figures are embedded and explained in the text, and keep the consistency in the terminology. It's surprisingly often this is not the case, so this is something that we are checking, for example, too, but it's really confusing for evaluators if you use different numbering, different wording of titles of work packages, etc., in different sections. And it's nice to have figures in there, it's nice to have pictures in there, but they should also be easy to understand and also contribute to the content. And you would also should also check that everything you write, or if you have pictures, etc., diagrams, etc., in there, check that they are also readable, understandable in black and white, because many evaluators still read them printed out or something. So check this too. So that was my last slide, and now we will hand over to Yuliya again, and then we will take all the questions.
Okay, I'm going to put on my evaluator hat now. So the year I got my fellowship, I was invited to be an evaluator for individual fellowship. And I guess it's, about 10,000 applications. They need a lot of reviewers. So those who were awarded fellowships, excellent candidates to become one. So that was the only year I did evaluation. After that, I didn't do IFs, because I always help people every year to apply, so I don't want to have a conflict of interest. But I tell you a little bit how the evaluation process works. So, Commission gets all these applications, and they separate them in different panels, and then they have to match projects with evaluators. And the only way they do it is by the keywords. The keywords that you've put in the application form, if they overlap with the keywords that I put in my evaluator profile, there is a match. So the keyword I put in my profile was sensors. And I got so many proposals on sensors. But I was expert in one kind of sensors, and they gave me proposals on many different sensors. So you can see how I know how sensors work, but I might not be the actual expert on your sensor. So be clever with the keywords that you put in if you want to be properly understood and appreciated. So like put a glucose sensor, or be quite specific. And also that gives you an idea to write for more generic public rather than a concrete expert. So there are 4 experts per each proposal, as far as I remember, and we get up to 16 proposals. That's where that acronym that stands out might just help you. We have 3 weeks to read these proposals. I think it's 2 hours per proposal. That's what they pay us for. Honestly, for the money, it's not worth it, but it's an amazing experience. And then we write the individual evaluation report. So we individually assess your project by this criteria. Criteria are exactly the same as the application form. This is so super simple. I mean, before it was very different in the previous program. Now just write the way it's structured. It's really good. And then we submit our evaluation reports, and then there is a time for consensus meetings. All these experts for 10,000 applications, they cannot meet in real life, so it's done online. And there isn't that much time to discuss one project. I think it's something like 45 minutes. It's not even, maybe an hour, you know. And the experts can come up with, like, the opinions can be very different. So we're all given the same guidelines as you guys to write this application. We're given these guidelines to judge you. But it's an opinion of evaluators. Could you convince this for people? There are no set rules, what's good, what's bad. Could you convince evaluators that this is good for the program, I use the best and talented researcher. So there's always, I feel, an element of luck, or not luck, it's not 100%, never is. People are different, they have different opinions. But there is a way to get as much right as possible. So after this meeting, we write one individual report, which we all have to agree on. Sometimes people don't agree in 1 hour, and then it goes later and later, and you probably don't want your proposal to be one of them. So taking all these things into account, help the evaluators to be good to you. Write clearly in a nice language that we can understand, in a nice font that I don't have to take my microscope to look at. Break it with pictures, with tables, but some information is better in tables. Just that way I will already have a nice warm feeling towards your proposal. Of course, I'll still judge it by the evaluation criteria, but just have some sympathy to those people who are doing it out of working hours. This is going to be after 5 or probably even midnight or somewhere on the plane. Think about that. So I have some kind of points that might prevent some of these questions. My recommendation for the perfect proposal. I think, and you can do it right now, the perfect match of you as a researcher, of the supervisor or host, and the chosen project will guarantee you the start for the perfect proposal. Your expertise has to match to the expertise of the supervisor and what training you can get with that particular project. That will have an amazing impact on your career in the future. That's why European taxpayers invest money in you. So, how do we judge the most talented researcher? There is a CV outline in the application form on which you should structure your CV template. Of course, publications count. You shouldn't apply if you don't have any publications. Your publications is the way to prove that your work was judged by others in your area and was approved. And first author publications is one of the criteria you often see in comments. The amount of first author publications appropriate to career stage, something like that. But also, where is your leadership? Where is your talent? show us that you've been already judged by others and been selected to be the best. For example, take part in competitions like the best oral presentation, best poster presentation. Are you a chair of Marie Curie chapter? Have you organized MCAA Conference? That is a leadership, that is a responsibility that other people have given you. And this is the only way really for the evaluators. I mean, we don't know you. Whatever is written on your CV is the only way for us to judge. Are you reviewing for the journals in your field? You know, what other things are you doing? How important are interdisciplinary aspects? It's important to address them. Honestly, the way the science is going, I think it's interdisciplinary more and more. And I see a lot of proposals that just very easily describe how they're interdisciplinary with, you know, the way you can apply your research. But if you are in that area and that's what you want to do, is not, just explain why not. The main thing here, you need to address interdisciplinary aspect. And this is up to you how you know, but experts, of course, can agree or disagree, so think carefully about that. What role does the training play? Well, we need to see that you will learn something from this fellowship. So I ask people this question when they come to me with the idea. I ask them, can you do this project now, as you're now? If the answer is yes, this is a bad choice of project. In your project, you have to learn. I mean, there is not a number of percentage of, you know, how much you can or cannot do, but it has to give you this opportunity to learn. And the best way for us to judge and see it also, it's in those details. It's exactly just what you mentioned. In month 3, I'm going to take a 3-day course in metabolomics provided by such and such. Here I know that it's going to be on 3 days because it's theoretical. I know that you've planned where you're going to need it in your project. In month 6, I'm going to be trained on mass spec usage by an experienced technician named such and such in our group. I see a realistic picture, I see details. This kind of elements, you know, give us proof that it will work. What is important to address and describe your supervisor, integration and hosting arrangements? I mean, I hope you're really fond of your supervisor and that's why you're going to learn from him. But saying things like, oh, Professor such and such is an amazing scientist, oh, he's so great at giving lectures and blah, blah. This is not good enough. Use numbers to describe how good he is, he, she is. X amount of publications, patents, books, collaborations with other industries, with countries. Use words to describe it. When you describe hosting arrangements, also one point to come back. He might be good, but he also has to be the most appropriate. If I give you a choice, where do you want to go do your research, for example, at MIT or University of Alaska? Most of you probably will answer MIT, but what if your research is on polar bears? Your institution has to be appropriate, you know, and then it will be easier for you to describe why it's the best place for you to learn. Of course, we're all trying to go to the best. What if your supervisor is a Nobel Prize winner? There's no way I'm going to believe you that this person is going to give you a lot of time on a daily basis. And the arrangements for supervision are very important. I mean, we need to be sure this fellowship is going to run. So it's okay, it's actually very important to show that there are intermediate members of the team who will be interacting with you, and this very big famous professor will see you, okay, maybe on a monthly basis and with group meetings, but then there is absolute interaction of you and the team and other management kind of people from whom you will learn on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And also show that there is support in your institution, and you will be integrated into departmental meetings, so you have this once a week seminar where everybody comes. What makes the impact section convincing? Your own career story, that's what makes it unique and convincing. I always say to people, don't read anybody else's proposal before you start writing it. Make it your own, think how it will impact your career. Then it will be the most realistic. Maybe after you've written it, then you can have a look and see what other things to use or not. But also the impact on the society, so the dissemination and outreach. Really have to think about every possible way this research can be useful to the society. I have seen comments like in marks being dropped on, like somebody really didn't think of this angle. And you can argue, well, you can argue whatever you want, that it's not, but evaluators decided this angle was important to your particular research. So you really have to be clued in everything. And about implementation, I'll finish now. Make it realistic and show that you're aware of the risks and you have mitigation plans. You can really nicely to fit in your previous experience or your supervisor by just mentioning, oh, I've done this part before, I know it's going to take only that. That's why this work package only that long. This section, I'm actually a big fan of this section right now because I've already done my fellowship. I could see where things can go really messy. You have to really think about what you're going to do on everyday life, in everyday practical work, and have a backup plan. I'm finished now, but I guess we can take any questions.
Yes, so you're welcome to answer questions, and I would just like to say one thing. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions right now, there is a booth upstairs for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, and there will most of the time be NCPs at that booth, so you can also come to us and ask if you have very specific questions.
And you can find me around as well. I'll be happy to answer.
Hello, thank you for the great presentation. I would like to ask about the non-academic institutions. What are the requirements for them to be eligible or a viable option? Thank you. If the host is non-academic.
I'm afraid I did not exactly get your question. What kind of institutions?
If the host institution, I'm applying along with in a joint application, if it's a non-academic institution, what are the requirements for it to be an attractive option or to be an addition to the application?
Thank you. It's a very, very good question, actually. Well, you have no specific requirements as such, but of course, you have the same rules, the same guidelines, the same template and so on. And I think one of the difficulties in some of the non-academic organizations is maybe to have a real suitable supervisor, for example. And this is one of the reasons why since 2 or 3 years there is a specific panel for the Society and Enterprise panel. And then you don't compete with applications from the academic sector, but only with applicants from the non-academic sector. So be sure to apply within the Society and Enterprise panel. But there are no additional specific requirements or something like this. But of course, you will also need to show there that you have supervisor, that you will be integrated, and that you will learn from this organization and so on. So no other additional specific requirements.
I think they should have peak number. I mean, and they should be research intensive. They have to do research. You're not going to get just work there. They have to do research. And I think something maybe to think about is training. Can you get training in other skills there, or show the source of that training that will be incorporated in your fellowship? Saying this, the quality of applications in this panel, about 50% of them below the threshold. I think that tells me something. There might be issues that needs to be addressed better. Yeah. And it's 87. It's below the mark. The cutoff score is still below than any other panel. It's 87, while the average 91.7.
Hi. So you said that a perfect match with host institute and et cetera, and a good project is starting you off for a perfect proposal. But you also said that a very well-written, concise proposal is important. So if you had the choice between a really, really well-written proposal with maybe not such a perfect match, or a very, very perfect match with a mediocre written proposal, as a reviewer, which one would you say would pass?
It's a question to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, as a reviewer, I still have to evaluate your proposal by evaluation criteria. Mm-hmm. So yes, I might just close my mouth and I will evaluate you as on a perfect match, on the perfectly good proposal by all the evaluation criteria. But with such high scores that these days are required to actually get it, I think every bit counts. You cannot have one or the other. You just have to have everything. You really have to aim for 100% to be within the chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can
I also use it?
I come back to you?
So my question is still about the host. When, for example, it's a big corporate, I'm already employed in this corporate and I want to go to an affiliate, is this already conflict so it doesn't work, or it can still work? So imagine I have a corporate that has a place in Austria and another place in Germany, and I apply with the same company but in Germany. Does this work or not?
So if I understand you right, you are already working for this organization in Austria, and then you would apply for an IF with the same organization in Germany, for example. Okay. Well, it's eligible, yes, if you stick to the mobility rule, it's eligible. Of course, what you have to think about is to be able to show what new things will you learn. So to show the impact. And maybe it's easy to show, but I think that if evaluators see this in your CV, you will have to pay extra attention in making this clear that this is really something new now, which I really need for my next step. This would be my answer. Would you like to?
I understand you're already in industry, right? I mean, it's maybe possible, but to convince someone that from industry you need to have a fellowship in industry, you really have to try hard to do that. You know, it's more like, you know, for people to have the exit from academia, I guess, to have an impact on your career. But sure, try.
I have a question regarding the European fellowship. Here, sorry. I think you mentioned that secondments within the EU are possible in total like less than 6 months. So, for example, if I apply and I have a host that is in academia, and then I would like to go to industry for this, could I also split it up, for example, into 3 months, or could I even go also maybe 4 months in total into industry and then 2 months also to another academia within Europe? That makes sense, like in the scope of the project then?
Yes, exactly. You have all these possibilities. So actually, it's you can apply for up to 3 months of secondment if your project will be altogether up to 18 months of duration. And if you apply for the whole 2 years or longer in case of the global fellowships, then it can be up to 6 months. And yes, you can split these secondments into several secondment periods, and you can also have more than one secondment host, if this makes sense.
I just remember something I would like to add about this. When you talk about secondments, you have to show that there will be someone to supervise you there. And in the same way you describe in your main supervisor, you need to give us information about that person in the secondment organization. Otherwise, I mean, what are you going to do there? Anybody going to even care that you're there? But to your question, you want to have maybe 2 secondments. Yes, but also show that it makes sense and practically, you can do it. It's integration again, unless you maybe really know those people and there won't be any problem. You really have to convince that's a good choice.
Hi. Thanks so much for nice presentations and the practical info. So, Yuliya, you said that you need to have applications to apply for this. So, how many publications you need to have, if I may ask, to have chances to have a successful fellowship? And Therese, you said that there are good and bad acronyms. Do you have some example of good and bad acronym? Thanks.
Yeah, this is the question I get asked the most. How many publications? There is no number and nobody is going to give you a number. You yourself should know what is appropriate for your career stage in your area. I have seen people with, let's say 1 main author, but 6 publications in total getting it. But it depends on the field. I think in social sciences, humanities, it's a totally even different way they publish. In computer sciences, conference proceedings. What I would do if I was you, Google people who got Marie Curie Fellowship in your area, a few of them, just to have a brief idea of what's required. Yeah. There was another question, sorry.
Yes, the acronyms. So what we partly see, and I suppose this is a common thing to do it in some, especially in some scientific areas, we have quite a long title, and the applicants take just the first letter on each word, and at the end you have something that you can definitely not pronounce and hardly read. So this would, for me, be not so good acronym. And just I don't know how many applications I've been reading, but just some things that pops up in my mind, though this was not an IF, but it doesn't matter, that was Batwoman. And I think this is a great acronym.
And also you think about you have to do branding, website, advertisement. We'll make it much easier if, it's something. I can give you an example. So my Marie Curie project was called Metaphora. And the new project I run now is called Exit. I love acronyms.
So just a comment, my impression is that beside the expertise on your field that you're applying is another skill that you need to acquire, and the template stuff that you showed and also your experience. I mean, 6 years you worked as a research officer, and then you said that you wrote your application for 3 weeks. It's just, 6 years of experience behind it, and people don't really think about it. And isn't it more like, skills that you need to have?
Well, I really hope you're not going to wait for 6 years. You don't need 6 years of that experience. Absolutely not. And right now, as you mentioned, there is support. This network of NCP 0 officers that you in this private, you can get that support of writing. You should worry about your idea and the project and your supervisor. I mean, it's not all that scary, but you have to aim to very, very high. Yeah.
And just a small comment also on that, we really do have also many successful very early postdocs. So I think that by all the good evaluators, this is also seen that, if you have something who have been active in a research for several years, or if you have a very early postdoc applying, they can still see the potential of this person. So it has to be good, yes, you should reach for the stars, yes, but it does not have to be perfect. Yeah, this is what I would like to add, just not to make it too scary. You should go for it, definitely.
And another question people ask me sometimes, when is the good time in my career to apply? Anytime, if that's what you want to do, because you're judged on the basis of where you are in your career now. Like, there was this stereotype, I'm just finished PhD, I'm really not good enough. No. If you can show that you already have potential and talent just from these 4 years, it's enough. Saying that the average age of Marie Curie awardees is 31 to 32 years. But that's because in some countries PhD takes much longer. But there are people from 25 and 26. The oldest is 68.
Hi. Thank you for a lovely presentation. I will quickly ask 2 questions. I'm here. I'll quickly ask 2 questions. One is regarding one of the eligibility criteria, which is like after completion of a degree, which enables one to apply for this fellowship. It's like maximum 4 years, right? Like maximum 4 years of any research experience that may not have, person may not have a PhD degree. So in that case, I want to ask that what if a person was working on technical positions, but in a lab, like not really as a research assistant, researcher, like JRF, like junior researcher or senior researcher, like not a fellow, but assisting the PI. This is one. And secondly, about publication, I would like to ask, what if a person has publication, like one or more than one, but from a bit unrelated field, like not completely unrelated, not diagonally opposite, but a bit unrelated. Is it counted? Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a tricky question, actually, the first part of it, because it's a gray area, and finally, in some way, you may also be asked to show, if you claim you are an experienced researcher based on the 4 years of experience. If there are any doubts, you may be asked to show this. And this can also include, for example, a paper from your previous employer explaining what you have been doing and explaining how this can be seen as a research activity. But it's not so easy to answer, and it's kind of a gray zone, so to say. But maybe we can talk about this also then later in the break, yes. And for the question about the publications, I would ask, can you answer this one?
So is this all story together, the publication from another field and research experience, not PhD, but research experience? So can you say that does this publication show your experience in particular field that could be relevant? Like, how can you judge what you've done before on the basis of which this project is going to be, which skills that you already have you're going to use in your project? And your publication is your merit of, talent, whatever, competitiveness. I think it's okay to switch fields. You could totally justify this, but is it only, one publication? You really need to think of a story here. Yeah, I totally agree, it's a very gray area. Yeah, we can talk maybe later. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question about tips on how to write in the career break due to a serious illness or a mental health disease in order to stay competitive. So, like, which part of the proposal should it fit in, and how can you address a career break due to these physical and mental illness?
Is this the career break after which you're coming back to research, or was just somewhere already in the past and you're now in research?
So let's say you take a career break and now you want to come back. The reason for the career break is a physical or mental illness.
Well, there is a career restart panel. Yeah, no, of course, there is a career restart panel if that break was within, the eligibility. You can say personal reasons. I don't think you really need to. You weren't working in research, and that's the main point, right? I've seen family reasons, health reasons, that kind of. You don't really need to go into details of that. No. Right.
Yes, I agree with this answer, and I think now the summary of the whole day will be here, so we will have to finish now, but you are welcome with your questions to both of us, and I give
Thank you very much to both of you, and this is a token of appreciation from our part. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. Please stay here. Now there will be the summary, and there will also be an announcement regarding the dinner, and if you haven't collected your dinner ticket, please do so from the reception.